This beautiful story about the disciples' encounter with the risen Lord on the road to Emmaus is the same type of experience that so many of us can have when we fail to recognize the presence of Christ, when it is right there in our midst, in its own mysterious way, ever present at work, at times and in places we might least expect. If I might jar your memory just a bit, you may recall that it was right about this time last year when there were a lot of strange things happening. After over 3 months of sheltering at home due to COVID-19, that order was lifted. And while some businesses and places of worship slowly began to reopen their doors, albeit with numerous restrictions, other businesses and services were still prohibited. It was summer then, and so no one knew what lay ahead for schools and students in the fall. Nonetheless, we cautiously began to peek out and venture out of our homes to see if it was safe. The spread of the coronavirus made us afraid to go anywhere. We were afraid to touch anything or anyone. We were even afraid to breathe. It was a very eerie and frightening time for us all. And who among us could have possibly imagined that 6 months, 12 months, 18 months later, we would still be living under the shadow of this pandemic? And then as this summer began, 2021, Governor Newsom announced that churches could resume masses indoors, and we didn't have to practice social distancing or wear masks. And even though this was welcome news, this transition has been an adjustment for us. Sitting next to people just a few months ago whom we were required to maintain 6 feet of separation. But we've learned a lot over these past 18 months. A lot about ourselves, a lot about each other, and a lot about our world. And we've also learned a lot about our life of faith. Because when we opened our church doors after they were closed, when we were told that we could not gather for Mass, that we could not receive the Eucharist, suddenly words that we had been hearing for years, perhaps decades, began to make sense and take on a whole new meaning. For example, that the Eucharist is the source and summit of the Christian life. Yes, this sacred meal really is far more foundational to our lives than we may have acknowledged in the past. And it took being deprived of the Eucharist to bring us a greater, more enlightened appreciation of just how precious this gift of the Eucharist is for us and how important our faith is to us. Any parish priest will tell you that over time, as you get better acquainted with your parishioners, you realize that they really do span the broad spectrum along what we might call the continuum of faith, from one end to the other. And on any given Sunday, the reasons why people come to Mass can vary greatly. We have those who come out of pure devotion, pure love for God. And attendance at Sunday Mass is their way of expressing that. It's what they do. It's their way of giving thanks. Some come out of a sheer sense of obligation. After all, it's one of the commandments to keep holy the Lord's Day. And they wouldn't think of missing Mass on Sunday unless they were at death's door. And for some, it's all about the community and fellowship. Gathering with family and friends, our sisters and brothers in faith. It's about inspiring and being inspired by others in our parish family. No doubt there are some whose purpose on Sundays is to set a good example for their children, so that they will come to know Jesus and be formed with Catholic values, with a knowledge and love for God in their heart. Or at least that's their sincere hope and prayer. And rest assured, there are those in our pews on any given Sunday who are simply searching, perhaps struggling, who are heavily burdened, overwhelmed by life's daily demands and challenges, for whom there is an inner hunger and thirst, and they're just not sure what to do about it or who to turn to. And so almost out of desperation, they come seeking solace, seeking comfort, strength, and hope. And perhaps without even realizing it, they're looking for something or someone to believe in. So depending upon the circumstances of our lives, we might bring to the Lord's table feelings that run the entire gamut from utter joy and contentment about life to complete sadness and despair. But of this much we can be assured. It is when we gather together at the Lord's table as people of faith that we are at our best. And there is no hope or need or prayer or expectation that we can possibly have or imagine that the Lord is not capable of fulfilling. And this deep and mysterious ebb and flow that we can feel so deeply is all the validation, all the proof we need in order to believe deep down within our bones that Jesus really did mean it when he said, "Where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, I will be there in your midst." Let there be no doubt in our minds that he is here with us right now. Jesus sent his disciples forth to proclaim the gospel in pairs, 2 by 2. We are not meant to walk our journey alone. The Eucharist that we receive has been given to us as our food, our nourishment, our daily sustenance. At this time last year, we got a glimpse of what it was like to go hungry, to go unnourished. Our spiritual lives suffered. We felt it in our soul. But the good news is that the emptiness and the longing that we felt reaffirmed for us that we cannot live on bread alone, nor allow ourselves to be separated from the Mass and the Eucharist for too long. But here's the clincher and our message for today. In the same way that Christ nourishes and sustains us on this earthly journey, we are called to nourish and sustain one another. We are called to become Christ one another. St. John Paul II, while he was still Pope, wrote a pastoral letter on the Eucharist, and I'd like to share one line from his words, and I quote, "All of us who take part in the Eucharist are called to discover the profound meaning of this sacrament. It is not enough to gaze upon the body of Christ. It is not enough to receive the body of Christ. We are called to become the body of Christ." End quote. At the consecration of the Mass, when the priest recounts Jesus' own words and elevates the host and cup, it would be enough if we would simply gaze upon the precious body and blood of Christ. But he has given it to us to receive, to consume his body and blood, so that we can become more like him, so we can be in union and communion with him. And that transforming grace that we receive is what empowers us to go forth and proclaim the gospel to others. Those first disciples that we read about in the Acts of the Apostles drew others to Christ through the testimony of their own lives. And when we not only proclaim but live the gospel authentically, others will not be able to resist. They will not be able to resist the lure of the good news. And just like in those early days, our communities will grow and our numbers will increase. Statistics tell us that an alarming 75% of Catholics don't believe in the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist. And as age groups that are surveyed get into the young adult and even teen years, that percentage rises even higher. That's not a good sign. And that's not the sign of a healthy church. And thus the reason, at least here in our Diocese of San Diego, why our Chief Shepherd, Bishop McElroy, and our diocesan leadership has initiated this effort, a call to all to reflect more deeply upon the place, the importance, and the meaning of the Eucharist in each of our lives. We are being asked to reflect and pray more deeply so that we can receive the grace the Eucharist imparts and in turn share that with others. This is a time of grace, and we will reap the benefits for years to come. Take this, all of you, and eat of it. Take this, all of you, and drink. Do this in remembrance of me. Jesus the Christ poured out, his body and blood poured out, that we might know the height and depth and breadth of God's love. Come, taste and see the goodness of the Lord.